Hello and welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon, and I love the movie Frailty. I genuinely believe it's the most underrated thriller of the 2000s. Plus, it's one of only 2 movies directed by Bill Paxton. And if I'm being honest, I think this thing is quietly kind of a masterpiece. Sure, depending on how you look at it, it has a few flaws. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll just say that the ending either works for you or it doesn't. And I think it fully works. But I can also see a version of the movie without it that might even be a little bit better. But as is, I think this movie is just great. From the rich cinematography coming from Bill Butler to the acting by both Jeremy Sumpter and Matt O'Leary, not to mention Matthew McConaughey just quietly perfecting being a guy telling a story about the past while being interviewed by cops about a murder investigation. But even McConaughey aside, there's also Bill Paxton both directing and starring as the dad character, and he even got his old Tombstone buddy Powers Booth to be in this thing, and who doesn't love Powers Booth? And that's why today we are diving deep into the story of Frailty, how the movie came to be, everything that makes it awesome, and its legacy 20 plus years later. So my history with this movie stretches back to being in high school, and I remember seeing the cover all the time at my local video store, but I never rented it because, well, just look at this box art. It's kind of bland, it doesn't really tell you anything about the movie. But the first time I saw this movie, I'm not sure I even saw it from start to finish because this movie played all the time on the Sci-Fi Channel. I was just channel surfing one day and I saw my boy McConaughey McConaugheying away, and it immediately caught my eye. And I just remember thinking that this movie was so good and thinking it was really weird that I never heard anyone talk about it. And then Frailty kind of faded from my memory for a while after high school. It wasn't until streaming really became a thing and it started to pop up on Netflix and HBO that I started watching it again. And then when I met my wife, it was one of the movies that I showed her that became part of our regular rotation of horror movies. And honestly, now that we're over 20 years removed from this movie coming out, I think I'm ready to call it an underrated masterpiece. I mean, the cinematography alone makes this movie worth watching. It's just got all of these beautiful, deep, dark shadows, and I love the way the light will cut through the elements of a shot. Really everything set in the cellar of this movie looks incredible. But before I get too deep into everything I love about Frailty, just a quick reminder that Born to Rant is just me. I write and edit my own videos. No AI, no corporate backing. And if that means anything to you, it would mean the world if you would like the video and subscribe to the channel. Okay. Now I think it's time to dive into the origins of Frailty and some behind the scenes stories. And the story of Frailty begins with the screenwriter, Brent Hanley, who was really inspired by both Stephen King and his Christian upbringing, saying that when he was in church as a kid, he'd be in the back reading Revelations with his friends and reading all the dark and scary parts of the Bible. And when he finished the screenplay for Frailty, it found its way to executive producer Tom Huckabee, who's responsible for showing it to Bill Paxton. And Paxton immediately fell in love with the script and took it over to his friend, producer David Kirshner, who really liked the script, but was kind of shocked when Paxton told him he wanted to direct the movie. But after seeing Paxton's enthusiasm, he agreed, and the two took the project to Lionsgate, who agreed to finance the movie at a budget of $11 million. And so Bill Paxton got to work on staffing up the movie. For the director of photography, they went with Bill Butler, who had a very long history of shooting some movies you might have heard of, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Grease, Child's Play, and of course, Jaws. As for the casting of the movie, because of its Texas setting, Paxton really wanted to ensure that the movie had some real Texans in some of the key roles. So he looked to his old Tombstone buddy, Powers Booth, to play FBI agent Wesley Doyle. And then he looked to young star Matthew McConaughey. Matt O'Leary and Jeremy Sumpter were both cast based off of their stellar auditions. And in October of 2000, Frailty went into production, filming entirely in California, using a combination of real locations and sound stages to capture everything they needed. As far as behind the scenes stories go, my personal favorite is that Jeremy Sumpter fully did not understand the movie at all.
It was totally weird to me. I didn't get none of it.
But my main favorite story of Frailty is that the team could only find one Hamm's beer can from 1979, so they just had to use the same can for every single scene it's used in. And once you know that Bill Paxton is holding an empty beer can, you really can't unsee it. Also, the axe being named Otis has a fun story behind it. Paxton actually got the name Otis while scouting locations for the movie and meeting an unhoused man in Pasadena. And when Paxton tried to give him some money, the man said he didn't want any charity. So instead, Bill Paxton asked him for his name and then paid him to use his name in the movie. Filming concluded in December of 2000, and there is one really great post-production story I want to tell, but it contains a spoiler, so you guys are just going to have to wait a couple minutes until we get to the spoiler section of the video. Originally, Frailty was scheduled to be released in late 2001, but after the events of 9/11, it was decided to push the release to spring of 2002. And on April 12th, 2002, Frailty was released into theaters where it placed 9th at the box office and made just $4.2 million. And it would go on to make a worldwide total of $17.4 million against its $11 million budget, making it a minor disappointment for the studio. Although I have to imagine that once this movie hit the home video market and started playing on cable, it became more than profitable. While audiences may not have connected with Frailty while it was in theaters, critics really did. Roger Ebert even gave it a perfect 4 out of 4 stars. And with all of that out of the way, I think it's time that we dive deep into everything that makes Frailty awesome. And I am going to be spoiling the plot for the movie from here on out, so if you've never seen Frailty, here is your one and only spoiler warning.
Isn't Travis Shedd that boy was picking on you at school last week?
He's a demon.
Now, I genuinely believe that Frailty is a movie that gets a little better every time you watch it, and a big part of that is how well the screenplay and filmmaking work together throughout the movie, and it begins almost immediately. We open with Powers Booth's Agent Doyle arriving to the FBI headquarters in Dallas, Texas, and we find McConaughey sitting in his office holding a picture of Doyle and his mother, which is a little moment that really stands out upon rewatching the movie, as is the fact that McConaughey won't shake Doyle's hand, but more on that later. McConaughey introduces himself as Fenton Meeks and tells Doyle he knows he's investigating the God's Hand killer, and he's there to tell Doyle that it's his brother, Adam. And I've always really loved the way McConaughey delivers this line.
You hadn't even heard me out yet, and already you doubt me.
And this is about where McConaughey's voiceover begins, and he tells us the story of he and his brother growing up in Thurman, Texas. How their mother had died giving birth to Adam, that they lived just next to the public rose garden, and that they have a great little family unit with their dad. And actually, fun fact about McConaughey's voiceover here, this was actually all recorded on the last day of filming in the backseat of a car. They expected to re-record it later, but they just really liked how it sounded, so they kept the original recording. And one thing I've always really appreciated about Frailty is how quickly the movie gets into the story. By minute 15, we've been introduced to the present timeline and all of the characters in the past timeline. It's actually right at the 15-minute mark that Dad comes into Adam and Fenton's room in the middle of the night to tell them about the vision he's just had. And the way that Paxton and Butler shoot this scene is perfect. Dad comes in and starts telling them about the angel he saw and that they've been recruited to be part of an ongoing war against demons. But the thing that sticks with me the most is that this is the family instantly splintering. Dad comes in and sits down on Adam's bed, and you can see that Adam immediately believes everything he's saying, because why wouldn't he? Adam's a little younger, a little more naive, and if Dad says they've got to kill demons, then they've got to kill demons. But on the other bed, we have Fenton just staring wide-eyed and in disbelief at all the things his dad is telling them. In fact, the only line that Fenton says in this entire scene is,
"That doesn't make any sense."
And I love the way the scene kind of starts to take on Fenton's point of view towards the end. We hear Dad's voice kind of fading to the background while he and Adam just stare at Fenton, expecting him to believe everything Dad's saying at face value. But I think the real cleverness of the script comes the next morning when neither Dad nor Adam immediately mention the night before, and he quickly convinces himself it must have been a dream. That is, until Dad calls out and reminds them when he drops them off at school.
And remember not telling anyone what I told you last night.
You won't, Dad. Bye.
Over the next few minutes of the movie, we get a montage of Dad finding and bringing home the 3 weapons the angel promised to be sending them, and this is actually one of the biggest problems I have with the movie. I don't like that we see any of this via Dad's point of view. I don't like seeing the light shining on the barn, and I really don't like the car transforming into a cathedral with an angel holding a flaming sword. I just think it would have been more effective if we just saw him randomly stop or zone out. I think it would have helped really dial up the mystery on whether or not Dad was telling the truth or if he was slowly losing his mind. But honestly, that's like my only complaint through the entire movie. And shortly after all of this, Dad brings home his first demon. And this is where Frailty really starts to creep into that horror territory, because the shot of Fenton looking out his window only to see Dad carrying a person over his shoulder in a tarp is genuinely terrifying, as is the way they shot the scene of Fenton going outside to investigate and tilting down with his flashlight to see the nurse tied up and crying. I feel like the smeared makeup on her face was a particularly great and horrifying touch. This is also where I'll reveal that fun fact that I mentioned earlier about the post-production process, because in the original edit of the movie, when Dad touches the nurse here, we were originally supposed to see her past evil deeds the same way that Dad and Adam do, but James Cameron told Paxton to hold it back because it would split the audience, and he's 100% correct. Not showing any of the visions here was the right call. But again, I have to wonder why he cut it here, but not from Dad's previous visions. So, after the murder of the nurse, they need to bury the dismembered pieces, and the angel has instructed them to do that in the rose garden behind the house. Which is when we cut back to the present and see Meeks tell Agent Doyle that he suspects the rose garden is where all of his brother's victims are buried. So the two decide to go on a little field trip. Here we also get another moment of Meeks avoiding being touched by Doyle, and as the two drive, Meeks continues his story, and it picks up with Dad having bought a new van and the family going out to hunt their next demon, which is one of my favorite sequences in the entire movie, with Dad loading Fenton and Adam into the van, driving them hours away, and then making them sit in a parking lot and wait for the old man thereafter to come back out from the store. This shot of Fenton's point of view looking over at Dad, seeing him reading, and then to the old man, and then back to Dad, who's now fully alert, is just masterful. It honestly feels like something out of a Hitchcock movie. After the murder of the old man, Dad leaves Fenton and Adam to bury the pieces, and here's where Fenton snaps and tells Adam that they have to run away, that their dad is clearly insane, but Adam insists he's not, and that he also sees the demons when Dad touches them with his bare hands. So, like every little brother ever, Adam runs to tell his dad, not considering the consequences of what it will mean for Fenton and their family overall. And this leads directly to some of my favorite moments of the entire movie. And it all begins with Dad asking Fenton to dig a hole. And the way that Matt O'Leary plays Fenton as a kid fueled by hate and anger here is just above what most kids at this age are typically able to do. And I do think that McConaughey's voiceover does help with a lot of the heavy lifting here, but Fenton just refuses to be broken down by the task he's been given, and more than that, it completely severs what little ties he still had remaining to his dad. I've also always really loved the way that after Fenton finishes on the first day, Dad comes over and is shocked and saddened to see Fenton's fingers all blistered and bloody after digging all day without gloves. Like, we really do understand that Dad still loves and cares about Fenton. He's just scared that Fenton isn't along with their mission to destroy demons. Upon completion of Fenton's pit, the family then moved their work shed over it, creating a cellar, or as McConaughey puts it,
We basically built a big wooden box in the ground.
After the completion of the cellar, when Dad brings home the next demon, he goes to hand the axe to Fenton, thinking if Fenton destroys a demon himself, he'll finally be able to see what he and Adam have been seeing. But Fenton can't do that. He runs away and then runs straight to the sheriff's office. Now, personally, I love that the sheriff doesn't believe him, because why would he? It's one of the most insane stories ever told, but it's also one of those stories so insane you kind of have to believe there's at least some truth to it. And I love the way that the dad asks Fenton point blank,
Does it have to be done?
When they do, Dad quickly kills the sheriff, and I love how much it affects the dad. He's absolutely torn up that he had to kill a human being, so much so that after burying the sheriff, Dad throws Fenton into the cellar and locks the door, leaving Fenton in a cold, dark pit for a full week. And Fenton locked in the pit is really the true horror of the movie for me. Also, Bill Butler's cinematography here is just amazing. I particularly love the touch of Fenton's head floating in the black void. This is apparently a reference to to the Night of the Hunter, which was a big influence on Paxton and Hanley while working on the movie, but personally it reminds me a little bit more of the floating head stuff from Vertigo. Now, one morning Fenton doesn't answer Adam, which causes Dad and Adam to finally open the cellar and check on him. And here Fenton explains that God has spoken to him. He now understands his and the family's purpose, which of course makes Dad very happy. A week later, when Fenton is back to full strength, the family go out to capture and destroy the next demon on Dad's list. And this time it will be Fenton's job to make the killing blow. Only when Dad hands him the axe, well, Fenton just can't take the madness anymore, so he drives it directly into Dad's chest. As he dies, he whispers something to Adam, and as Fenton goes to free the supposed demon, Adam comes charging in with the axe and destroys the demon as well. As the two bury their father, Adam swears that he'll bury Fenton in the Rose Garden one day. We cut back to the present and we see that Agent Doyle and Meeks are now in the Rose Garden, and Doyle's confused because the man standing before him is Fenton Meeks. And here's where it's all finally revealed that McConaughey is not Fenton. He's in fact been Adam this entire time. We learn that Adam has taken over and become a demon slayer himself, and we see that Adam and Dad did in fact see the sins of their victims upon touching them with their bare hands, which is why he wouldn't let Doyle touch him up to this point. He explains that Fenton was actually the God's hand killer. He snapped after their childhood and just went insane. He also explains that he knows Doyle killed his mother, and he kills and buries Doyle in the Rose Garden. And I love that the movie ends through the perspective of this random FBI agent from the opening of the movie. He can't remember what Adam looks like, and all of their security tapes are fuzzy around Adam's face, showing that Adam was in fact being protected as he went along his mission. And I really love that the final reveal of the movie is that Adam is now the sheriff in Thurman, and he welcomes in the FBI agent he met at the beginning of the movie, who just doesn't recognize him at all. So, nearly 25 years later, what is the legacy of Frailty? Well, I think it's one of those movies that if you know, you know. I have a lot of friends who've seen it and agree with me that it's incredibly underrated and a great movie, but then I also have a lot of friends who've never seen it, even after me incessantly recommending it every October to pretty much anyone who asks. Sadly, Frailty is one of only 2 movies directed by Bill Paxton, the other being a movie about golf called The Greatest Game Ever Played that starred Shia LaBeouf. And it really is a shame we didn't get any more horror or thriller movies from Bill Paxton before his tragic passing in 2017. I really think it's possible that he would have thrived in a post-Get Out world and get another movie like Frailty made. I think you could also call Frailty the soft launch of the McConaissance. Sure, it's about a decade before it would really kick off, but in 2002, McConaughey was still primarily doing rom-coms and more big-budget, family-friendly movies. Frailty stands as a really odd movie in his filmography for this time period. As for the 2 leads, Matthew O'Leary and Jeremy Sumpter, they've both continued working and have had varying levels of success over the years. And this sadly remains the only movie that Brent Hanley has ever received credit for writing, although he did do some uncredited rewrites on Disney's Holes. And earlier this year, Lionsgate actually released a 4K version of Frailty that I definitely need to get my hands on at some point. So it's clear that there is an audience for this movie. As far as I know, a sequel was never discussed because, I mean, how do you sequelize a movie like this? It feels impossible. But let me know in the comments, do you guys love Frailty as much as I do? Do you think I'm giving it a little too much credit? If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. And as always, a very special thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon. I could not do it without you guys. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, there's a link in the description below. Patrons get credited at the end of every video, early ad-free access to videos, access to an exclusive Discord server, and they get to help me choose what movies get covered on the channel. We release new videos covering all of your childhood favorites every Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.